The phone vibrated in the stillness of the afternoon. Helen had just set down her cup of tea when her daughter-in-law's sharp voice cut through the calm. "I'll leave the 3 kids with you. After all, you don't do anything anymore, do you?" A heavy silence followed, slicing through the air like a blade. Helen sat up straight, a cold glint flashing in her eyes. "All right," she said quietly. "Bring them over." But deep down, she knew it was time to teach Brooke the lesson of her life. The little house on the outskirts of Columbus still smelled of fresh paint, a sign of the new beginning Helen had longed for after 35 years of teaching. She had dreamed of trips to Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, and the California coast, but that condescending voice had just shattered everything. She looked at the framed photo of Michael on the wall, the gentle eyes of the son she had raised alone after the accident that took her husband's life. "I'll leave Aiden, Chloe, and Leo with you. Just 2 weeks," Brooke continued, her tone indifferent. "You're free anyway, free." The word stung the pride of a woman who had spent decades teaching children the meaning of respect. Brooke. "I already have plans," Helen said, keeping her voice calm. On the other end, Brooke laughed mockingly. Plans. What plans could a retired old lady possibly have? Knitting that laugh cold and arrogant scraped against Helen's ears like shards of glass. 7 a.m. tomorrow I'll drop them off, and don't feed them junk food like last time. Last time Christmas 6 months ago when she had only been allowed to see her grandchildren for 2 hours because their real grandmother on the other side of the family was the one with money. After the call ended, Helen sat motionless. The anger in her slowly settled into a chilling calm. She looked at the Teacher of Excellence certificate hanging on the wall and softly read the small words engraved below. To teach a lesson is to plant a seed. Helen pressed her lips together. Perhaps it was time to plant her final seed, one meant for her daughter-in-law. She picked up the phone and called Carol, her longtime friend who used to work at Child Protective Services. "Do you still have those tiny recorders?" Helen asked. "What are you planning?" Carol asked, worried. Helen gazed out the window where the crimson evening light spread across the bare trees. "I'm planning to teach a very memorable lesson." That night, she couldn't sleep. The ticking of the clock blended with memories of long nights grading papers, rush dinners between tutoring sessions, and sleepless nights watching over Michael when he was sick. She remembered her husband, the man who had once told her, "Take care of our son. Make him a good man." She had kept that promise. But now that son stayed silent while his wife insulted his mother. At 3 a.m, Helen brewed a cup of chamomile tea and sat by the window. Outside, the drizzle was thin as breath. She whispered, "Brooke, you forget that I once turned unruly children into kind ones. You'll be no exception." The next morning, right at 7, the doorbell rang. Brooke appeared in a designer dress, red lipstick gleaming, dragging the 3 children behind her like packages to be delivered. Aiden's allergic to dust. Chloe doesn't eat vegetables. Leo won't sleep without his iPad. I left the medicine in the blue suitcase. Oh, and don't spoil them. Then she leaned close to Helen's ear and said coldly, "And don't forget I decide whether or not these kids have a grandmother." The door closed. The sound of her heels faded away. Inside, only the 3 children remained staring at her with distant eyes. Aiden, 12, was glued to his phone. Chloe, 10, pressed her lips together in disdain. Leo, 7, wandered off looking for the TV. "Hello, my loves," Helen said gently. No one replied. In that moment, she saw clearly the line between 2 worlds, the grandmother they had dismissed and the children who had never known love. Yet instead of sadness, Helen felt a familiar spark rise inside her challenge. She had faced rebellious students before, had seen broken families heal through patience and kindness. Now these 3 children would be her final lesson. She looked down at the old rug beneath her feet, where the morning sun streamed through the window, forming a long golden beam. In that instant, she realized this battle wasn't just about teaching the children respect, it was about reclaiming her own dignity. She walked toward the kitchen, the soft shuffle of her slippers brushing against the wooden floor. "All right, my dears," she whispered. "Today we begin a very special class. No blackboard, no chalk, just one grandmother and 3 children who need to learn how to love again." Outside, the sun had fully risen, illuminating the small sign by the porch, home of Helen Miller, retired teacher. No one knew that from that morning on this peaceful little house would become the battlefield of a quiet revolution, where a woman once dismissed as useless would prove her true strength, the strength of determination, of love, and of the justice she had believed in all her life. The sun had just risen when Brooke drove her shiny SUV down the quiet street. Helen stood on the porch watching until the car disappeared behind the trees. A light breeze passed by, carrying the scent of dried chrysanthemums from the backyard, and her heart sank. From this day forward, this house would no longer be a peaceful retirement haven, but a battlefield where she would fix what life had broken, starting with her 3 grandchildren. Inside, the children sat in silence like strangers. Aiden, 12, was glued to his phone. Chloe, 10, held a lipstick and checked her reflection in a small mirror. Leo, 7, was rummaging under chairs looking for the TV remote. "Are you hungry?" Helen asked. No one answered. Only the sound of video game music filled the air. She took a deep breath and brought a tray of steaming pancakes to the table. "Breakfast is ready. If you want to eat, come to the table." No one moved. Helen remained silent. Half an hour later, Leo was the first to appear, his eyes lighting up when he saw the elephant-shaped pancakes. "Can I have some, of course?" Helen said. Chloe followed, frowning. "Mom says your food is too greasy. Then try it and see if she's right." The girl took a bite, then mumbled, "It's actually good." Finally, Aiden came out still holding his phone. "There's no Wi-Fi, no." Helen replied, "Hear people talk to each other." The boy let out a short laugh and sat down. Helen looked at his distant face and felt her chest tighten. Behind that detached gaze was the loneliness of a child who had never been truly hugged. The meal ended in silence. As she cleared the table, Aiden leaned back in his chair. "Who washes the dishes?" "Here whoever eats washes," Helen said. All 3 stared in disbelief. "At home, Mom says we have help. Here we are, the help." At noon, Helen went upstairs to find an old photo album. The pictures of young Michael made her heart ache, a brown-haired boy in a red sweater, smiling brightly in his mother's arms. She remembered the lonely years of raising him, working 2 jobs selling cakes at church just to afford his tuition. Everything she had done was for that smile, the same smile now overshadowed by a woman named Brooke. She recalled the first time she met her daughter-in-law. Brooke had been sweet and polite back then, her eyes full of feigned gratitude. Helen believed her even helped pay for half of the wedding. Now the memory chilled her to the bone. After the wedding came years of disdain, snide remarks, cold stares, and that cruel phrase old people should know when to step aside. Helen had stayed silent for her son's sake, but silence only invites more cruelty. The sound of running water startled her. In the kitchen, Leo was fumbling with the faucet water, splashing everywhere. Chloe stood nearby, laughing. Helen walked over and gently turned it off. "It's all right," she said, drying the boy's hands. "Here we clean up after ourselves. No one serves anyone else." The children looked at her puzzled. For the first time, they heard a voice that was firm but not harsh. That afternoon, Helen sat on the porch, sipping tea, watching the children play in the yard. Though reluctant, they had gone outside. Leo lined up pebbles on the ground. Chloe picked wildflowers. Aiden sat on the steps, quietly staring at the sky. Helen smiled softly. She reached into her pocket and took out the small recorder Carol had given her the day before. "Are you really going to do this?" Carol had asked. Helen's answer had been simple. "If I don't, they'll grow up just like their mother." At sunset, the first sound of laughter echoed through the yard. Leo fell into a water tub. Chloe burst out laughing, and even Aiden chuckled. The simple scene brought tears to Helen's eyes. Maybe this battle wasn't hopeless after all. As night fell, the house filled with the soothing scent of chamomile tea. The children ate dinner more politely this time, occasionally glancing at Helen with a new kind of curiosity. After the meal, Aiden asked, "What can I help you with tomorrow?" Helen smiled gently. "Start by saying thank you." The boy hesitated, then whispered, "Thank you, Grandma." Just 3 words yet. They warmed Helen's heart more than any compliment could. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, she sat at the wooden table and wrote a few lines in her old notebook. Day 1. The children are not bad. They just haven't been loved the right way. The warm light reflected on her face, revealing a quiet determination. She looked out the window at the bright moon shining over the garden and smiled faintly. For the first time in years, her heart felt light. Life had taken too much from her youth, her happiness, her husband, even her dignity. But now in this house with 3 innocent children under her roof, she felt as though she had been given one last chance. A chance to teach, to heal, to love, and to reclaim the honor people thought had been buried with her old age. Helen closed the notebook and turned off the lamp. In the darkness, she could hear the steady breathing of the children upstairs. Each breath was a reminder that the battle had only just begun. But for a woman who had once raised a child through storms and shaped thousands of students into decent people, victory was never out of reach. And this time, her pupils would be her own family. The next morning, Helen woke as sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, resting on her frail hands. The smell of toasted bread filled the house, wrapping it in an unusual warmth. There was no phone ringing, no sharp voice from Brooke, only the sound of little Leo's footsteps as he tried to pull a chair closer to reach the jar of strawberry jam. "I want to spread it myself," he said, his lips sticky with honey. Helen smiled. "Good job, Leo. In this house, everyone does their own work." Chloe walked in her hair, messy, holding a wrinkled t-shirt. "Grandma, this shirt is ugly." Helen's voice was gentle. Instead of complaining, try to think of a way to make it prettier. The girl went quiet, then took the shirt outside to hang it under the sunlight. The light reflected on her face, looking so much like Michael when he was little. After breakfast, Helen said, "From now on, there are no maids, no privileges. If you want to watch TV or use your phone, you'll have to earn it by doing good deeds. Whoever helps others gets 1 hour of Wi-Fi." Aiden raised an eyebrow. "Mom says we just have to behave and we get everything." Helen replied, "Here behaving means knowing how to treat people." The boy fell silent, a flicker of confusion passing through his eyes. At noon, she had them help her cook. Leo washed the vegetables, Chloe sliced the bread, and Aiden watched over the soup. "Careful it doesn't burn," she reminded. "I got it," he said, his tone less distant than before. As the scent of soup filled the air, Helen stood still watching her 3 grandchildren busy at work. In that moment, she saw an image from years past Michael as a young boy, brown-haired and smiling brightly in their old kitchen. In the afternoon, laughter echoed from the yard. Chloe taught Leo how to jump rope while Aiden filmed with the phone he'd earned for 15 minutes. Helen watched them, warmth spreading through her chest. But she knew this peace would not last. Brooke would not easily tolerate losing control. That evening, the phone rang. Helen looked at the name Brooke and answered. Her voice came through sharp and shrill. "Are the kids behaving?" Make sure they eat on time and don't give them anything fried. I'm in Miami. This conference is very important." Helen narrowed her eyes. "Really? Then why is the music so loud? Sounds like a bar." There was a pause on the other end, then silence. The call ended. Helen held the phone, her heart heavy. Her years as a teacher had taught her that when someone lies, their voice trembles at the end of a sentence. Brooke was lying, and her instinct told her this was only the tip of the iceberg. Later that night, when the children were asleep, Helen remembered the USB Carol had given her. She plugged it into her computer. A cold, familiar voice filled the room. It was Brooke. "I'm leaving the kids with her. When I come back, I'll claim she treated them badly so I can get full custody. That old woman can't do anything." Helen turned off the recording and sat still. Outside, the wind howled through the cracks in the door, but inside her, a fire of fury had ignited. She walked up to Aiden's room. The boy was still awake, his eyes wide open in the dark. "You're not asleep yet. I'm scared I'll dream of Mom. Why, she said if I listen to you, she won't love me anymore." Helen sat down beside him and held his hand. "Real love never comes with conditions. One day you'll understand that." The boy nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. As she stepped into the hallway, Helen saw Chloe clutching her teddy bear. "Grandma, Mom says your house is dirty, but it smells like cookies. Why does she hate you?" Helen stroked her hair. "Because some people are afraid of kindness, Chloe. They're afraid of being compared." The girl said nothing, only hugged her bear tighter. Helen returned to her table, opened her notebook, and wrote, "Day 2. The children have started asking questions. Questions are the beginning of freedom." The next morning, gray clouds covered the sky. Helen woke early to prepare breakfast. When Aiden came down, he asked, "What are we doing today?" "We're cleaning the garden. The grass is too high." He frowned but went outside with his siblings. The drizzle dampened the earth and the smell of wet grass filled the air. Chloe complained about getting dirty. Leo was covered in mud, and Aiden patiently pushed the mower. When they finished, Helen brought out mugs of hot cocoa. "It tastes better after hard work, doesn't it?" Leo grinned, and Aiden nodded. "I've never worked with an adult like this before." "Well, now you know," Helen said softly. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Helen opened her laptop and sent Carol the audio file along with a short message. "I need this to be legal evidence. She's coming back soon." Outside, the wind roared against the roof. Helen closed the computer, her eyes shining with determination. The battle had truly begun. And this time, the retired teacher who had once been dismissed and disrespected would teach her daughter-in-law the greatest lesson of all: never underestimate the strength of a grandmother who knows the truth. The third morning began with the sound of the doorbell. Helen opened the door to see Carol, her longtime friend, standing on the porch holding a heavy paper bag. "Here are the things you asked for," Carol said quietly. Inside were 3 small recorders, a hidden camera disguised inside a smoke detector, and a sealed envelope. Helen took them with steady hands. "Thank you, Carol. Today I begin." "Are you sure about this? This isn't like teaching misbehaving students anymore?" Carol said with concern. Helen glanced toward the window where her 3 grandchildren were eating breakfast, laughing louder than the day before. "That's exactly why I have to do it. I won't let them grow up surrounded by lies." After Carol left, Helen hid the recorders under the dining table in the living room and near the front door. She mounted the hidden camera on the ceiling, covering it with a thin layer of dust. Every step was prepared with the precision of a final lesson plan, but this time, her student was her own daughter-in-law. When the children went out for a walk, Helen opened the envelope. Inside were bank statements, debt records, and financial reports provided by Carol's sister. Each number felt like a blade credit cards opened under Michael's name, more than $30,000 in debt, and several international trips paid with their joint account. "Brooke," she whispered, "you've been feeding your betrayal with my son's hard work." At noon, Helen cooked beef stew. When she served it, Chloe exclaimed, "Grandma, this tastes better than at home." Helen smiled. "That's because here we cook with patience, not with money." Aiden hesitated, then asked, "Grandma, is Mom really busy with work?" Helen looked at him and asked, "What do you think?" The boy fidgeted. "If she's busy, why doesn't she video call us?" The room fell silent. Later that afternoon, while the children played outside, Helen went into Aiden's room. His phone lay on the desk unlocked. A new message appeared from someone named Dominic. "When is she coming back? I miss you. Everything's ready in Miami." Helen quickly took a picture and saved it on her hard drive. The evidence was coming straight to her. That night, the children went to bed early and Helen sat alone on the sofa. The lamplight reflected on her calm but determined face. She opened her notebook and wrote, "Day 3. The truth has begun to reveal itself." The next morning, the phone rang. It was Michael. Mom Brooke said, "You're all doing fine." She sent pictures from her conference with the ocean behind her. Helen kept her voice steady. "We're fine. But when you have time, stop by. I need to talk to you about the house." "All right, I'll try," Michael said, sounding exhausted. Helen hung up, a sharp ache piercing her heart. By noon, the sky darkened and rain began to fall. The children sat around the table as Helen told them stories from the days when she was poor. "Back then we had nothing, but we still lived with dignity." "Poverty isn't as frightening as losing one's integrity," she said softly. Chloe asked Grandma, "Mom says poor people don't understand the world." Helen smiled faintly. If money were the measure of understanding, then many rich people wouldn't live such foolish lives. Aiden laughed genuinely for the first time. Leo nodded. "I like listening to you more than Mom," he said. Helen placed her hand gently on his head. "As long as you learn to tell right from wrong, I don't need to be liked." Later that evening, as she washed the dishes, the phone rang in the living room. On the screen appeared the name Dominic. Helen hesitated, then answered. A young man's voice came through, warm and casual. "Hey, darling, when are you coming back? I already booked the tickets." Helen said nothing, letting him talk for a few seconds before hanging up. Her body trembled slightly, but her eyes shone bright with resolve. The proof was undeniable now. That night, after the children were asleep, Helen called Carol. "Tomorrow I'll report this to Lauren at Child Protective Services, but I want to wait for Michael to come back so he can see it for himself." Carol replied, "You're doing the right thing. Stay strong." Helen ended the call and looked out the window. The rain had stopped, but inside her, the storm was just beginning. She opened her notebook again and wrote, "Day 3 ends. I am no longer afraid. I am Helen Miller, the woman who once taught children how to become good people. And now I will teach my own daughter-in-law what justice truly means." On Wednesday morning, Helen woke to the sound of the wind whistling over the roof. She brewed a pot of hot cocoa and sat by the wooden table, flipping open her small notebook. The last line from the night before was still there. "I will teach Brooke what justice means." Today, she knew everything would begin to change. The children woke up late. When they came downstairs, they were surprised to see breakfast already waiting: pancakes, fruit, and warm milk. "Why are you up so early?" Grandma Leo asked. "Because I have something important to do today," Helen replied. "But first we eat together." At first they were shy and awkward, but soon Leo laughed and pulled his sister toward the chair. The air around them grew warmer, like a real family sharing a morning meal. After breakfast, Helen said, "Today we're cleaning the living room. Everyone has a job here." Chloe frowned. "Are you going to teach us like students?" Helen smiled gently. "No, I'm teaching you how to live." Outside, the rain began to ease. The room brightened as the children started working. Aiden vacuumed, Chloe wiped the windows, and Leo arranged the books on the shelf. Helen stood watching them, her heart filling with a rare peace. Their laughter echoed through the house that had once been so silent. Near noon, the phone rang. It was Michael. "Mom, I got off work early today. I'll come by tonight." Helen smiled. "Good. I have something to show you." When she hung up, she felt determination rise inside her like a newly lit flame. In the afternoon, Carol stopped by with a folder in hand. Lauren from Child Protective Services reviewed the evidence, she said. "If we can add copies of those text messages, they can open an official case." Helen nodded. "I'll have everything ready by tonight." While the children played in the yard, Helen sat at her computer. She carefully backed up every file, the recordings, the text messages, the photos, her movements deliberate and steady. When she finished, she wrote a short note for Michael. "The truth is painful, but it's the only thing that can save your family." That evening, the smell of freshly cooked rice filled the house. Michael arrived in wet clothes, his face tired from the rain. The children ran toward him, shouting, "Dad, I thought you'd all be asleep," he said softly, kneeling to hug them, his voice trembling. Helen watched her eyes stinging with tears. She placed the folder on the table. "Michael, you need to see this." He opened it, flipping through each page as his face slowly drained of color. The bank statements, the messages, the recordings, everything was there. "This can't be true," he whispered. Helen placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Brooke is in debt. She's been unfaithful, and she planned to take the children to Miami with her lover. If I hadn't found out, you would have lost everything." Michael sat, frozen, his voice barely audible. "I thought if I just worked hard, I could hold this marriage together." Helen looked at her son, her tone calm but firm. "A decent woman needs an honest husband, not a rich one. But a woman like Brooke, no matter how much you give, she'll always want more." At the top of the stairs, the children huddled close together, listening quietly. Aiden's small voice broke the silence. "Dad, does that mean Mom isn't coming back?" Before Michael could respond, Helen answered softly, "Your mother will come back, but this time I won't let anyone hurt our family again." All evening, Helen and Michael worked with Carol over the phone. The next morning, Lauren would come to start the official case, and Michael signed the papers to confirm everything. When it was done, Helen felt lighter, as if years of burden had finally lifted from her shoulders. Late that night, after the children had fallen asleep, Michael sat in the kitchen, the warm yellow light outlining his weary face. "Mom," he said quietly, "if I lose everything, will you be angry with me?" Helen took his hand, her voice unwavering. "You're only losing what was never worth keeping. What you still have is your real family, these 3 children and me." Outside, the rain fell softly like a lullaby. Helen looked out toward the garden, her heart calm. The storm was coming, but this time she wouldn't face it alone. She had her son, her grandchildren, and most of all, she had the truth. Before going to bed, she opened her notebook and wrote, "Day 4. The truth no longer hides, and when dawn comes, justice will knock on the door." On Thursday morning, Helen woke to the sound of Carol's car stopping at the gate. The sky was clear and unusually calm, as if the world itself was waiting for something to happen. Carol stepped inside carrying a leather briefcase. "Lauren confirmed the meeting for noon," she said. "Michael just needs to sign the last papers." Helen nodded. "Good. Today, everything will begin to come to light." In the kitchen, the smell of freshly baked pastries filled the air. Leo was helping Helen whisk eggs, Chloe was folding napkins, and Aiden was wiping the table. "Is Dad coming?" Grandma Leo asked. "Yes," she replied, "and we'll have a special guest, too. Someone who's going to help us tell the truth." The children didn't understand, they just looked at each other curiously. At exactly 10 o'clock, Michael arrived. He looked more awake than usual, his eyes clear, his steps steady. "I've made my decision," he said firmly. "I'm ending this marriage for myself and for the kids." Helen gently placed her hand on his shoulder. "Good. Sometimes losing something is the only way to find yourself again." Around noon, Lauren from Child Protective Services arrived. She was a middle-aged woman with a serious but kind expression. "I'm here to verify the situation and open an official case," she explained, setting a small recorder on the table. The children sat quietly beside each other, watching her with cautious eyes. Helen poured tea, invited her to sit, and handed over the folder she had prepared. Lauren read through each document carefully, the bank statements, photos of Brooke, with Dominic recordings and text messages. With every page she turned, her expression grew heavier. "This is clear evidence of financial fraud, child neglect, and emotional abuse," she said at last. Michael clenched his hands, his lips tightening. "I don't want her to go to jail," he said softly. "I just want to protect my kids." Lauren nodded. "We'll handle this legally without retaliation, but you need to cooperate fully." "I will," Michael said. Helen looked at her son, her eyes filled with both pain and pride. That afternoon, Lauren spent time speaking privately with the children. Leo stuttered a little but spoke clearly. "Mom is always gone. She leaves me with strangers." Chloe whispered, "Mom says Grandma is poor and not worthy of love." Aiden looked down. "Mom says if I love Grandma, she won't love me anymore." When Lauren finished listening, she shook her head gently. "You children are very brave," she told them. Helen stood outside the door, listening, her throat tight with emotion. Every word pierced her heart like tiny needles, but she also felt something miraculous happening. The truth was setting those young souls free. When the meeting ended, Lauren closed her folder. "We'll submit this to the court. Brooke will be summoned to explain herself when she returns. For now, custody goes to you, Michael." He exhaled deeply, as though a chain had been lifted from his chest. Helen squeezed Carol's hand and whispered, "Thank you. I couldn't have come this far without you." Carol smiled softly. "Helen, you're the one who made it meaningful." That evening, the sky cleared and the golden sunset filled the kitchen. The family gathered around the dinner table. Helen made Michael's favorite beef stew, the comforting aroma spreading through the house. Aiden looked up at his father. "Dad, are you going to work less now?" Michael smiled gently. "I'll work less and spend more time with you." Leo clapped his hands. "Then tomorrow, can you teach me to fix my bike?" "Of course," Michael said with a laugh. Helen looked at the scene before her, her heart swelling with quiet joy. For years she had dreamed of a dinner like this, simple, warm, and free of lies. After the meal, when the children went upstairs, Michael stayed behind. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm afraid Brooke will come back and cause trouble." Helen looked him in the eye. "She will come back, but this time we have the truth, and the truth always wins." She took a small recorder from her pocket. "I still have the original recording where Brooke talks about her plan to take the house. Tomorrow morning, I'll give everything to the lawyer." Michael grasped her hand, his voice trembling. "I'm sorry for making you endure so much for so long." Helen shook her head gently. "Don't apologize, my son. I'm only sad that you lost faith in yourself. But now you've found it again." Later that night, when Michael went to his room, Helen stepped out onto the porch. The crescent moon peeked through the branches, casting a soft light over the small garden. She sighed, not out of weariness, but relief. Everything was finally falling into place. In the notebook resting on the table, she wrote, "Day 5. The truth has been spoken. The children are beginning to smile for real, and the mother within me has awakened. The battle isn't over yet, but I'm halfway to victory. Helen closed the notebook and turned off the lights. Outside, the night wind blew gently, whispering a tender goodnight to those who had just relearned how to love. On Friday morning, Helen woke to the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. The smell of pancakes drifted through the air. When she came downstairs, she saw Aiden flipping pancakes, Chloe cutting fruit, and Leo whisking milk. "Grandma, today we're cooking for you," they said. Helen laughed. "Well, it looks like I'm about to be out of a job." The air felt light and fresh, like a morning untouched by shadows. Michael soon came down the stairs. His shirt neatly pressed his eyes, brighter than they had been in years. "I've taken 2 weeks off," he said. "I need time with the kids." Helen placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Now you're truly becoming a father." Breakfast was filled with laughter. Leo spilled his milk, Chloe teased him, and Aiden pretended to sulk. Helen simply watched, memorizing the moment the sight of a family reborn. After they ate, she brought out 3 small notebooks. "From today on, each of you will have your own journal. Write what you feel." Aiden frowned. "Like homework." "No," Helen replied with a smile like talking to yourself. Chloe opened hers and wrote the first line, "The first day of a real life." Helen read it and felt warmth spread through her chest, her pain slowly transforming into faith. By noon, Michael received a call from the lawyer. "The court has accepted the case. Brooke will be summoned when she returns to the country." He hung up quietly. "Are you all right?" Helen asked. "I'm not angry anymore," he said. "I just want the kids to be safe." Helen nodded. "That's what makes a real man." In the afternoon, Carol stopped by carrying a small gift box. "For the kids," she said, "paints and clay to help them express themselves." Helen smiled. "You always know exactly what I need." The living room soon turned into a small art studio. Leo molded a clay house, Chloe painted a tall, leafy tree, and Aiden drew their family holding hands. Helen looked at the picture and saw herself in the center, her hair silver, her smile radiant. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Aiden blushed. "I want you to always stay here in the middle of us." Helen hugged him tightly. "I'll stay as long as you all remember how to love." That evening, Michael cooked spaghetti. When he brought it to the table, Chloe exclaimed, "Dad, this tastes better than Mom's." The room fell silent for a second before everyone burst out laughing. Helen looked at her son. His eyes no longer held pain, only peace. After dinner, they gathered to watch a movie. Leo rested his head on Helen's lap. Chloe leaned against her father's shoulder, and Aiden sat quietly beside them. Helen felt the warmth spread around her, realizing this family had truly come back to life. When the movie ended, Michael asked softly, "Mom, aren't you afraid Brooke will try to get back at us?" "No," Helen said calmly. "People who lie destroy themselves with their own words. The truth will protect us." She took out a small recorder. "This is the original recording of Brooke talking about her plan to take the house. I'll hand it to the lawyer tomorrow." Michael squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry for letting you go through so much." "Don't apologize," Helen said gently. "You found yourself again, and that's all that matters." When Michael went upstairs, Helen stepped out onto the porch. The full moon shone over the small garden, and the faint scent of freshly cut grass filled the air. She took a deep breath, feeling completely at peace. In her notebook, she wrote, "Day 6. The children have laughed. The father has risen. I, the grandmother once forgotten, have become their foundation again. Justice is not only about punishment, it is about healing." Helen closed the notebook and turned off the lights. Outside, the night breeze was soft and tender, like a whispered goodnight. In her dreams, she saw Richard, her late husband, smiling in the moonlit garden. "You did it," he said. Helen reached for his hand, but all she felt was a warm light. She woke with tears in her eyes and a smile on her lips. As dawn broke, sunlight streamed across Aiden's painting of the family holding hands. Helen touched the fresh paint gently. She knew that a new chapter had begun, a chapter of truth, of love, and of a woman once dismissed as useless, who now stood tall as the pillar of her family. On Saturday morning, the sky was clear and bright. Helen brewed a pot of tea and stood by the window watching her 3 grandchildren running through the garden. Their laughter floated in the breeze light as a morning melody. She never imagined that just a few short days could change so much. Michael walked in, holding an envelope. The lawyer sent the documents, he said. The court will hold an emergency session if Brooke returns early. Helen nodded. Good, we must be ready. The morning passed peacefully. Aiden helped her water the flowers, Chloe read a book, and Leo sat quietly writing in his journal. His handwriting was slow and clumsy, but his words were pure. Today I am happy. I am not afraid anymore. Helen saw the line and her lips trembled. A child brave enough to write down his feelings, that was the beginning of healing. Around noon, Carol stopped by. Brooke has booked her flight home, she said. She'll be here in 3 days. Helen stayed calm. Good. She doesn't know everything is already in place. Michael took his mother's hand. I won't run away this time. I need to face it. In the evening, Helen prepared a special dinner. She made the vegetable soup Michael used to love as a child, the meal from their poor but loving days. When the food was served, the family gathered around the table. Chloe asked Grandma, will Mom go to jail? Helen set down her spoon and looked straight into her granddaughter's eyes. Everyone who does wrong must take responsibility. But don't let hatred grow in your heart, my dear. Hatred only makes the heart heavy. Aiden spoke softly. I don't hate Mom. I just want her to understand that you're the good one. Helen smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. As long as you know that, my dear, that's enough for me. After dinner, they shared stories. Michael reminisced about his childhood, how he used to think his mother was the strongest person in the world. And you were right, Helen said. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because I learned to keep moving forward even when I was. The children stared at her, their eyes shining. As night fell, Carol and Lauren arrived. We'll arrange police presence when Brooke returns, Lauren said. She'll be required to attend immediately and won't be allowed to meet the children alone. Michael nodded. I just want everything to go smoothly. The kids have been through enough. Helen looked at her son, pride swelling quietly in her chest. When their guests left, she stepped out onto the porch. The soft moonlight bathed the garden and the cool wind brushed through her silver hair. Everything was calm, as if the storm had passed, but she knew the real one was still on its way. That night she couldn't sleep. Images of Brooke flooded her mind, the fake smile at the wedding, the mocking words, the slamming doors. Once Helen had hated her, but now all she felt was pity. A person who lives by lies can never understand real love. Near dawn, she heard small footsteps. It was Aiden. Grandma, I couldn't sleep, he whispered. Come here, she said softly. He sat beside her. I'm scared Mom will come back and everything will be like before. Helen held his hand firmly. No, Aiden. This time is different, because we're not silent anymore. Silence is what makes people weak. The boy nodded and leaned his head on her shoulder. When morning came, Helen looked down at her grandson sleeping peacefully beside her, her heart light and calm. True strength, she thought, is not in revenge, but in protecting others with love and wisdom. The next morning, the children picked daisies in the yard. Michael took pictures while Helen poured tea. The family sat together on the porch under the gentle sunlight. Chloe asked Grandma if Mom says sorry, will you forgive her? Helen smiled faintly. Forgiveness isn't about whether someone deserves it. It's about freeing your own heart. The three children looked at each other, then wrapped their arms around her. Michael stood nearby, his eyes glistening. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm proud to be your son." Helen replied softly, "And I'm happy because you finally understand." She looked up at the blue sky, listening to the children's laughter echo through the air. In 3 days, Brooke would return carrying the weight of her own choices. But Helen was no longer afraid. She had waited too long for this moment, not to face it with anger, but with truth. She opened her notebook and wrote the final words of the day. Day 7. Calm before the storm. The truth doesn't need to shout it, only needs to stand firm. Helen closed the notebook and took a deep breath. In the soft morning light, her face radiated serenity. The woman once dismissed and overlooked had become the pillar of her family. The storm might come, but it could never take away what was most precious: love and resilience. On Sunday morning, Helen woke earlier than usual. The house was unnaturally quiet, as if it were holding its breath in anticipation. She stood before the mirror, gently straightening her silver hair before brewing a pot of tea. On the table lay Carol's note, short and clear. "Brooke will land tomorrow night." Helen nodded softly. Only 1 day left. Michael came in dark circles under his eyes. "Mom, what if Brooke comes back and loses her temper?" Helen's voice was calm. "She will, but this time we won't bow our heads. You have the truth, the law, and me." He sat down and took her hand. "I just don't want the kids to get hurt. They're stronger than you think," she said. The children soon came downstairs, laughing. "Grandma, can I make apple pie today?" Chloe asked. "Of course, but set the table first," Helen replied. Their cheerful voices filled the house, pushing away the tension that had hung there for days. After breakfast, Helen went to the market with Aiden. He was quiet for a long time before asking, "Grandma, did Mom ever love Dad?" She paused, smiling sadly. "Maybe once. But some people love because they need security, not because of their hearts." "I just hope Dad isn't sad anymore," he said softly. "No one stays sad forever if they're still loved." Helen replied. In the afternoon, Lauren arrived. "The police will be on site when Brooke returns," she said. "All we have to do is stay calm." Helen thanked her. Lauren looked out at the garden where the children were playing. "It's incredible. In just a few days, they've changed so much because they've been heard," Helen said quietly. That evening, Michael worked in the living room while Helen sat at the table writing a letter by hand. "Tomorrow, my daughter-in-law will return," she wrote, "but not to trample us, rather to face the truth. I am not waiting to win only to end this." When Helen went upstairs, the children were already in bed. Grandma Leo whispered, "What if Mom comes back and starts yelling? Then I will stay calm," she said softly. "Anger is the weapon of the weak." "I believe in you," the boy murmured, wrapping his small arms around her. That night, a light rain fell. Helen lay still, listening to the wind whistle against the windows. Her eyes were closed, but her mind was full of old images. Brooke's fake smile, her cutting words, the doors slammed in her face. Helen no longer felt pain, only fatigue and the readiness to let go. The next morning, everyone was tense. Carol called to confirm arrangements, and Lauren texted to report that the police had taken their positions. Michael paced the room while Helen sat quietly, carefully noting every detail. Each stroke of her pen was firm and deliberate, like a teacher preparing for the most important lesson of her life. "Grandma, do I look pretty in this dress?" Chloe asked, twirling in her yellow dress. Helen brushed her hair lovingly. "You look beautiful, sweetheart, but what matters more is being strong. I'll be strong like you," the girl said, her eyes steady. Near noon, Michael sat beside his mother. "What if she begs for forgiveness?" he asked. "Then you can forgive her," Helen said, "but don't forget. Forgiveness is for moving forward, not for letting someone hurt you again." He nodded, realizing how much his mother had changed. By afternoon, the sky turned gray. A strong gust of wind swept through the garden. Helen walked along the rows of trees, picking up fallen petals and whispering to herself, "The storm is coming, but I will not be afraid." Inside, the children were packing their overnight bags. Carol would take them to her house that evening to keep them safe during the confrontation. Leo held Helen's hand and whispered, "Promise we'll still be together after the storm." "I promise," she said. "After the storm, the sky will be clearer." That evening, Helen brewed tea and sat by the window watching the rain fall harder. Michael came in and said quietly, "I'm afraid she'll come tomorrow and lie again." Helen's expression stayed calm. Liars can't win forever. Every lie eventually breaks at its weakest point. Michael smiled faintly, his eyes filled with new confidence. When the house finally went quiet, Helen sat alone and opened her notebook. She wrote, "Day 8. Peace has passed. Tomorrow the truth will be revealed. I feel no anger, no hate, only the wish for justice to come gently, decisively, like dawn sweeping away the night." She closed the notebook and blew out the lamp. Outside, the rain grew heavier, blending with the wind, heralding the coming of a fateful morning. Helen looked up at the ceiling and took a deep breath. For the first time in many years, she didn't feel small. Tomorrow, Brooke would return, and the world would finally hear the voice of the woman once dismissed as useless, not through anger, but through truth strength and a love that refused to surrender. On Monday morning, the rain had just stopped leaving the road glistening with silver reflections. Helen brewed a pot of ginger tea and set it on the table, her eyes lingering on the old family photograph, Brooke standing beside Michael, her smile artificial, her eyes cold. Today, everything would come to an end. Michael stepped out of his room, his shirt perfectly pressed, but his hands trembled slightly. "Mom, I'm worried. What if Brooke causes a scene?" Helen's tone was calm. She might shout, but she no longer has the power to hurt anyone. "You have the law, the truth, and you have me." The phone buzzed. A message from Carol read, "The police are in position. Brooke will arrive at noon." Helen took a deep breath and glanced at the clock. Every second seemed to fall heavy, yet she felt no fear, only the slow, steady rhythm of her heartbeat, calling the moment of justice closer. At 3 minutes past 12, the sound of an SUV engine roared outside the gate. Michael stood up. Helen remained seated, her hand resting gently on her teacup. The door swung open. Brooke entered, her skin-bronze lips painted bright red, wearing an expensive new dress. "So you've been waiting for me?" she sneered. "Michael, you look pathetic. And you," her eyes slid over Helen with disdain, "you still refuse to grow old." Helen said nothing. Michael spoke firmly. "Sit down, Brooke. We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," she snapped. "I'm here to pick up the kids. They're not here," Helen replied evenly. Brooke's brow furrowed. "Are you joking? I'm their mother." "A mother?" Helen raised an eyebrow. A mother who abandoned her children, deceived her husband, and planned to flee to Miami with her lover, Brooke, froze. "You're lying." Michael placed a thick folder on the table. "It's all here, photos, messages, bank records. You betrayed me and tried to take my children away." Brooke laughed mockingly. "Paperwork can be forged." From the corner of the room, a man's voice interrupted. It was Martinez. "What about this recording?" he asked, pressing play on his phone. Brooke's own voice echoed through the room, cold and unmistakable. "I just need CPS to believe me so I can get the kids back. Once I have them, Michael will do whatever I want." Brooke's face turned pale. "You recorded me." "No." Helen said quietly. "You recorded yourself." "We only listened." A knock sounded at the door. Lauren from Child Protective Services entered with a police officer. "We're here to verify the complaint," she announced. Brooke glared. "You're all trying to frame me." Martinez spoke calmly. "No, we're here for justice." Brooke screamed. "You're stealing my children. I'm their mother." Helen rose to her feet, her voice steady and firm. "You had a duty, not power, and you destroyed everything." Michael spoke softly but resolutely. "I once loved you and trusted you, but I can't let you hurt our children anymore." He placed a document in front of her. "This is a divorce agreement and a waiver of custody. Sign it and I won't press charges." Brooke's hands trembled. "You wouldn't dare." Martinez's tone was cold. "Dominic has already confessed, including your plan to flee the country." Brooke's lips parted in shock. "He betrayed me." Helen looked at her, her voice gentle but sharp. "No, he chose what was right, something you never learned to do." The room fell silent. Outside, the wind swept across the porch, carrying the scent of wet earth. Brooke stared at the paper, then lowered her head and signed. The scratching of the pen against the dry paper sounded like chains breaking. When she finished, she threw the pen down and shouted, "I gave my youth to this family, and now you've taken everything from me." Helen's tone remained calm. "You've lost nothing you ever truly had. Love and respect can only be earned through honesty, not deceit." The police officer stepped forward. "Mrs. Brooke Miller, please come with us to address charges of financial fraud." Brooke screamed. "All of you will pay for this," but no one responded. As the police car drove away, Michael sat down and buried his face in his hands. Helen placed her hand on his shoulder. "Cry if you need to, my son. This isn't a failure. It's a release." Michael whispered, "I don't even know what to say." Helen smiled gently. "Thank yourself for having the courage to live honestly." They sat in silence, listening to the soft wind moving through the window. A faint light broke through the clouds, glinting across Helen's wrinkled hands. She felt a deep, quiet relief, as though 10 years of burden had finally lifted. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The house was filled with the scent of ginger tea and warmth. Helen closed her eyes and listened to the sound of peace returning at last after so many years of storms. 3 days later, the Ohio sky was clearer than ever, as if no storm had ever passed. Sunlight streamed through the windows, spilling into Helen's small house. After years of turmoil, peace had finally found its way back. Brooke was being held for investigation, and the court had granted temporary custody of the children to Michael. Yet even as justice arrived, Helen still felt the quiet tremor of everything that had happened. That morning, Michael's car stopped at the gate. Leo was the first to run forward, throwing his arms around her. "Grandma, I missed you so much." Chloe followed behind, holding a small bouquet of daisies. "I picked these for you from Aunt Carol's garden." Helen embraced them both, her eyes glistening. "I missed you too, my loves." Aiden stood back, his face serious. "Grandma, I'm sorry for the mean things I said before." Helen brushed his hair gently. "As long as you understand now, I'm not angry anymore." Breakfast that morning was simple toast eggs and warm cocoa. Michael watched the children, his gaze softer than Helen had seen in years. "Mom," he said quietly, "the court confirmed I have full custody. Brooke isn't allowed to contact the kids." Helen nodded. "That's the right thing to do for her and for them." Around noon, Lauren arrived with a folder. "All the evidence has been verified," she said. "Brooke will be charged with fraud and asset misrepresentation." Helen poured her tea and answered calmly, "I don't want to see her suffer. I just want her to understand that no one can live forever on lies." Lauren smiled. "You've already taught her that lesson." That afternoon, sunlight slanted through the window, bathing the yard in gold. The children laughed as they played in the garden. Michael sat on the porch steps, his eyes distant. "I still don't know whether to be angry or to feel sorry for her," he said softly. Helen replied, "Don't be angry. A liar punishes themselves more deeply than anyone else can. Live honestly so your children can see what truth really looks like." That evening, they had their first complete family dinner in years. Chloe told stories from school, Leo proudly showed a drawing of our new home, and Aiden asked Grandma if one day Mom comes back, would you forgive her? Helen looked deeply into his eyes. "I'll always keep the door open, but whoever walks in must first bow before the truth." When night fell, Helen sat on the porch under the moonlight. The cool breeze carried the scent of jasmine. Michael came out with 2 cups of cocoa. "I never thought I'd live to sit this peacefully again," he said. "Peace doesn't come on its own," Helen replied. "It's a reward for those who dare to face the darkness." Michael smiled faintly. Dad would be proud. Helen looked up at the sky and said softly, "He's been watching you all along, just as I have." The next morning, news of Brooke's case spread throughout the neighborhood. Neighbors came by, some to comfort, some out of curiosity. Helen smiled kindly and said nothing. Carol arrived and hugged her tightly. "You did it, Helen." "No," she replied. "We did, and the children are the real reason we made it." That afternoon, Aiden came to her holding a notebook. "Grandma, I wrote an essay about my hero." "Who is it?" she asked playfully. The boy smiled. "You. You taught me that being brave doesn't mean having power. It means speaking the truth." Helen's throat tightened. She hugged him close, pride flooding her heart, a pride that needed no words. When evening fell, Michael placed a document on the table. "Mom, I got promoted to manager. Everyone at work knows what happened, but no one looks down on me. They said I have strength." Helen looked at her son with gentle eyes. "That's the reward of being honest," she said. He took her hand, and together they sat in silence. Between them, there were no more words, only the glow of peace. Late that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Helen opened her small notebook. Her pen moved softly across the page. Day 11. After the storm comes the sun. No victory is born from hatred, only peace from truth. The children are laughing again, and my son stands strong. And I, once dismissed as useless, have finally found my purpose. She closed the notebook and turned off the lamp. Outside, crickets sang in the gentle night breeze that drifted through the window. Helen closed her eyes, a calm smile on her lips. The battle was over, but the journey of love and resilience continued in the quiet, steady heartbeat of the home she had protected with all her heart. A month later, summer returned to Ohio. Morning sunlight streamed through the window, falling across the garden filled with bright white daisies the children had planted with Helen. Their laughter echoed across the yard, clear, pure, and free from the shadows of the past. Helen stood on the porch with a cup of tea in hand, her heart warm. At last, the house was truly alive again. That morning, Michael stepped out of his office, his face glowing with excitement. "Mom, I just signed a new contract. I've officially been promoted to production manager." Helen smiled, pride shining in her eyes. "Your father must be smiling from above. You've walked out of the darkness on your own." The 3 children ran over shouting, "Dad's the best in the world." Michael hugged all 3 tightly, his voice trembling with emotion. Helen watched quietly, her eyes misty. She remembered a morning not long ago when this house was filled with fear and uncertainty. But now everything had changed. Around noon, Carol stopped by. "I have good news," she said, placing a newspaper on the table. "The court has ruled that Brooke is guilty of fraud and document forgery, but she's received a suspended sentence for cooperating with the investigation. She's leaving the city to start over in another state. Helen nodded gently. Maybe that's for the best. Sometimes forgiveness is the greatest punishment. Carol smiled. You're still the same Helen I've always known, always believing people can change. In the afternoon, the house was filled with laughter and song. Chloe played the piano, Leo colored, and Aiden helped Helen tend the garden. As she trimmed the flowers, Helen said softly, "Remember this, my loves? Happiness isn't about having a lot. It's about knowing how to appreciate what you have." Aiden looked up. "I understand now, Grandma. I used to just want toys, but now I only want our family to stay together." Helen smiled, her heart light as the wind. That evening, Michael prepared a special dinner spaghetti, the dish he had once learned from his mother. The family sat together under the golden glow of the lights. "Mom," he said, "I'm planning to open a small workshop that makes handmade household goods. I want to call it Helen's Home." Helen froze, touched. "Why name it after me?" "Because everything I have today started with you." His words left her speechless. Memories flooded back the rough hands, the sleepless nights spent sewing the meals where she gave him the best portion while keeping little for herself. Every sacrifice had bloomed into this moment, into her son's smile and the laughter of her grandchildren. When the children ran outside to play, Michael stayed behind. "I've filed papers to make you the children's legal guardian," he said quietly. Helen's eyes widened. "Why would you do that?" "Just in case something ever happens to me," he said. "I want them to stay with the person who loves them most." Helen took his hand, tears welling up. "Don't say such things, but thank you for trusting me." That night, when everyone was asleep, Helen sat by the window as moonlight fell across her old notebook. She opened it and wrote the final entry, Day 12. The storms have passed. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing the present from the grip of the past. Love, when strong enough, can heal even the deepest wounds. She looked up and saw the garden bathed in silver light. On the table lay Aiden's forgotten drawing, a family holding hands in front of a small house with the words scrawled above my real family. Helen smiled softly. That simple childlike drawing was the greatest reward of her life. The next morning, the doorbell rang. The mailman handed her a small envelope. Helen opened it. It was a postcard from another state. The handwriting was familiar. "Thank you. I'm working at a nursing home now. Maybe for the first time in my life, I understand what real love means. Brooke." Helen read it in silence, then smiled gently. At last, she's begun to learn. That afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Helen and the children planted more flowers in the garden. "Grandma, why don't you rest?" Leo asked. "Because when you're still doing what you love, you never truly grow old," she replied. The boy laughed, gripping her hand. "Then you'll stay young forever." Grandma Helen laughed too, her eyes bright with tears and joy. The golden light of sunset spread across the garden, carrying the soft scent of daisies. Helen watched her son laughing with his children, feeling peace, as calm as a lake after a storm. The woman who was once overlooked, once cast aside, now stood surrounded by love, pride, and serenity. The storm had truly passed. All that remained was sunlight, laughter, and a heart that had once been broken, but had learned to forgive, to love again completely and without fear.